Are your limited beliefs holding you back from the life that you truly desire? Let's change that. Stay tuned for this episode of Spirit Lift. Before we get started, please remember to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell. It's right down there below, so you'll be informed each and every time we upload a new video around themes of spirituality, nutrition, and well-being. In this episode of Spirit Lift, I have the deep and great pleasure of speaking with Kimberly, naturopathic therapist and life coach from Canada. Kimberly, welcome to Spirit Lift.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure, Kimberly, and I am so excited to speak to you in this episode of Spirit Lift. And so many people are reaching out to me saying, hey, Devin, how can I change my life around in this year of 2021? And how can I feel like I'm really moving on with my life? Like so many people just feel like life is not moving on, that everything is static and a continuation of 2020. And people feel more disconnected in their personal relationships, to the people around them, just to life itself. There just seems to be a low energy, a low vibration in the way that people really feel that life can just move in the direction that they would truly desire, if their dreams could come true, and not feel in fear every time when they hear something in the news or what have you. So I think you can really give great insight, Kimberly, into how we can live no matter what the circumstances are in our life, in our most, deep desire of our soul, what is truly calling out for, no matter what we're going through. And I think your insight can really, really help so many people with these circumstances and any circumstance that they were to encounter in the future, So can you please give our viewers and our listeners who are listening on podcast form a little bit of background about yourself, why you decided to get into this field and really desire to help people, and also explain to them a little bit what is a naturopathic therapist?
Sure. Well, my journey probably began in 2006. I had owned my own business for about 19 years doing physical labor. So more of a decorator, but I was the laborer, the one that did all the work, crack filling, paint and wallpaper, and you name it. And I had some back issues, and I went to a neurologist, and he said that I needed surgery on my neck and that I had a 50-50 chance of being paralyzed. And long story short, I was like not taking that. I was like, I have a choice in this, and I knew there was something I was missing. So I did a little bit of research and decided that I was going to try to figure it on my own. What was I missing? Because I had lived a good life as far as what I thought. And I found Reiki. So Reiki was like my first love. It's energy work, and a lot of people know about it today, but back in 2006, there wasn't so many people that knew about it. So I took a course in level 1, and immediately when I took it, it's like it opened my intuition up more than it had been opened at that point. So I was starting to have a deeper connection with myself and an understanding of things I didn't really understand before. And I kind of said that really it felt to me like somebody took my hand and put it on the earth, and I could feel the heartbeat of the universe within myself as well as feeling it outside myself, which was really something I was always aware. I've always been an empath, but I wasn't aware. I would have to say that I wasn't grounded enough. So through the process of working on myself, within 6 months, I was feeling a lot better. So much that I decided that I wanted to dig deeper into it. And I did a ton of courses and within self-help and growth within myself and trying to help other people. And I'm always an extremist. So I decided that if this was what I was going to do, then I was going to give back first. So I did about 400 treatments for free, and I worked on people that had legit massive issues, like massive traumas, abuse. One of my favorite cases was a guy I worked on that had He had been on life support for 7 days, and after his 7 day, he called his wife, or he told his wife, he said, I want you to call Kim and tell her to come work on me. So I went in and worked on him. Long story short, again, he had 3 arteries blocked completely, 1 artery half blocked. And when I went in and worked on him, and I remember my husband at the time, he said, aren't you scared like to go work on him? And I said, no, why would I be afraid? And he said, well, what if he dies? I said, well, if he dies, he was meant to die. I'm not going to hurt him. It's non-invasive, and I just love doing it, right? So I went up to the hospital every 2 days and I worked on him. And by the time I was done working on him, he had all 3 arteries unblocked, and the one that was half blocked was still half blocked, but I knew what it was about. So the neat thing about the story is the 3rd time I went in to work on him in the hospital, his father, who had passed away a long time ago, was standing on my right shoulder, and he was telling me that this was all his issue. This was all his doing. And basically it was one of those things where he put a lot of pressure on his son to be something he really he didn't want to be. So it intrigued me, and I thought, well, so a heart attack with a left leg, he had a heart attack and he had his left leg, they were going to amputate his leg, and they couldn't do one because of the other. He was too weak. So I couldn't tell him about the conversation I had with his father. I didn't know how he felt about that kind of thing. So I waited and called his wife and said, was his father really hard on him? Did he have a really hard time? Was it a strain on him? And she said, absolutely. So that led me to want to research even more about how the body held on to trauma and how we can't heal unless we deal with our shit, right?
Yeah.
In life. And we don't. We're not taught to deal with stuff. We're taught how to stuff things down. So that work, I have to say, I still do it. I might always do it to a certain level, but I worked on people that were terminally ill and getting ready to pass. I've worked on people that I thought I was there to help live, and I was really there to help them pass and deal with the stuff before they pass, so that in the next life, they wouldn't have to carry that burden, right? So, imagine me, little old me, this stuff was hitting me like fast, and I had nobody to talk to. And people would have thought I was crazy, and people did think I was crazy. But one thing about me is, if spirit's talking to me, and we can all call it whatever we want, but when they talk to me, I listen and I do whatever I'm told to do, right? And I don't put a lot around that either. It's just as simple as waking up every day and putting your shoes on. That's the way it was for me. So I did that for I'm still doing it, but I started doing that in 2006. And I opened a legit full-time practice in 2009. And my practice has been completely 100% referral. I don't do anything to build more. My marketing and stuff is I market me. I take me out into the world and I meet people one-on-one. And because of COVID, I couldn't work. So I decided that I was going to use the opportunity to go back to school to do more of what I wanted to do, which is get out. And Spirit told me I had to reach more people quicker because it was going to be coming fast and furious. So that's kind of what I did. So the natural therapy was a way of finding a way to be covered so that I could give people coverage when they came to see me. So like insurance coverage, so they could be reimbursed. So I had to do a lot of different types of courses to be able to do that. But once I got the heading, I've been off and running ever since.
That's really interesting, your journey and your story, Kimberly. And I want to ask you, really out of my own curiosity, like what really drove you to want to get into this so much in 2006? Like something led you to it, but like what my question is, what gave you the persistence and the tenacity and the will to really go forward despite maybe not being able to get completely through the situation you're going through, but still have the heart to really continue and be dedicated to what you're still doing now?
Well, honestly, my own health was not great, and I was in so much pain. I have 8 herniated discs, so 4 in my neck, 4 in my lower back, and I was always kind of told that I worked too hard, I did too much, blah blah blah, and I really didn't. I don't really think that's not a good excuse. I don't think, if we went back 100 years, people worked way harder than we do today, you know? So I never give that much energy. I think for me, it was more that I've always had this magnetic pull since I was a little kid. And I always knew things that other people didn't know. So I'd feel things. I'd be able to read people too. So I could read people and I could tell that they said one thing to whoever they were talking to, but behind closed doors, that's not really what they were doing, or that certainly wasn't how they were living. And when I was in all the pain I was in, I couldn't really function the way I wanted to, and I knew something was missing. And this is quite a little story, but I laid in my bed and I kind of made a deal with the universe and said, I don't know what's going on within myself, but I need to figure it out. And I know I'm missing something, and I knew it wasn't like this big life-altering thing I was missing. So I was looking for a simple fix, a simple explanation to why this was all happening. And I laid in bed and I was meditating and crying at the same time. And just like that, I asked the question. I said, what is it I'm missing? And like somebody sketched Jesus in front of me, because at the time, that was where I gave the most power to Jesus. I loved the story of Jesus, and, you know, and I could see the sketch of Jesus beside me, and he took a deep breath, and just like I could see the energy come out of his mouth and into me, it was like I was filled up with something. And I didn't really know what it was, and I can't give you a great story about it other than what it was. I'm a real truth person. I'm straightforward. I couldn't lie if my life depended on it. So it happened, and then I changed. Something in me changed. And I had been in so much pain that it was kind of making me a little crazy. And I went to see this therapist, and she took a scarf. And this is as simple as it was. And I'd like to make it big and pretty, but it wasn't. She just took a scarf and she stuck her finger up through the scarf. And she held it down and she said, this is the world. This is everybody. And they're all underneath this canvas and nobody's paying attention. But she said, if you poke your head up above everybody else, she said, you can be connected to everything that is. And I swear to God, I was like a little kid in a candy store, and I don't even know how to explain it. I just felt like I had this new life, and I was just off and running. And I probably did like 13 courses in 2 years. And I actually got my certification and my license coming in the back door. So I went before the board because, believe it or not, I come across as this very big, I'm 6 feet tall, powerful, confident person, but I'm very nervous too, because I feel so much. It's hard not to be a nervous person when you feel everything. So, through nothing short of my belief in life and love and how incredible this universe really is, I just decided that I had to try to figure things out on my own. And I can say that I lived through a lot of poverty and dysfunction as a child, lots of trauma. And I'm grateful for it today because, I love my family, but there was a lot of mental illness, bipolar and stuff like that. And there was a lot of judgment in my life. So a lot of like racism and chauvinist and homophobic and all that. And I was always going for the underdog. From as early back as I can remember being a little kid, I just think I was always different. And I think I always seen things differently than most people. And even today, like, I won't say that I'm a gay person. I just say I'm a person that's in love with somebody that's the same sex as me. It's irrelevant for me, really. I don't even think about it. So I can't say I went through stuff the way other people did and had to come out. I didn't. I've always been me, and I'm just a better version of me,
And it's very important what you're saying, and when you're contextualizing that story and those circumstances about growing up, because the thing is, it seems like you have experienced a lot, you have witnessed a lot, you have confronted a lot of situations, circumstances instances, everything. But you seem to have a very particular, good, positive way to turn the negative into a positive, right?
Mm-hmm.
You seem to have seen. I like that description you give about poking through, I forgot the exact nomenclature used, but the veil, basically rising above. Basically, when you said that, the term "rise above" came to my mind. So, and I think it's extraordinary that you have been able to do that, and that you probably still do in certain ways throughout your life. But you have a certain deep, tenacious way of doing that doesn't phase you either, which is great. So people right now who are just really going through a mess in the times that we're living in, and maybe even before these times, just in general, there could be anything. Why do you think people really kind of have a lot of disbeliefs about the power of what they have inside of them? Why do they maybe not believe so much in themselves to get where they could or would want to go in life? And how do you help them through that?
Well, I think first and foremost that no matter what, I think we've lost our way. I think that if I have to go back to, I believed in God, but today I don't believe the same way as I did before, because I believe that God is love, and that's what we're all looking for. We're all searching for love and connection. And I think we're struggling today because people don't believe in anything. So they don't have anything to back them up. There's no, where do you gain your strength from? Well, I gain mine from the universe, because this whole big, beautiful universe is an energy. And if you know you're connected to it, then you're connected to everything that is and everything that isn't at the same time. So today, I think people are struggling because they don't believe in anything. And as well as that, we have been programmed since the minute we can walk and talk. And we've been programmed to believe that we have to grow up and get married and have kids and the dog and the white picket fence. But what if that's not what you want? So how many people are being who everybody else wants them to be, but they don't know how to even begin to think of who they really are. And they can't be that person because of how they're affected by, they need people to like them. Well, I need me to like me. And if I don't like me, oh boy, that's not a very nice place to be. And that's the most important place for me to be. If I don't like me, how can I take me out into the universe and into everyday life? I can't do it. So today, I think COVID is a gift. And I know people would be throwing rocks at me, but that's okay. Right. Because I think the meaning of COVID was to slow people down and to make them pay attention to the things they weren't paying attention to before. And we have been struggling, and we have been going in the wrong direction for a long time. And I think that because COVID slowed everything down and stopped things, I think it gave us all a chance to evaluate where we are in our life and are we living the life we want to live? Are we with the person we want to be with? Or did we I hear a lot of stuff because of the type of work I do, and it's sad to me because I hear a lot of women wanting to have men to take care of them, and I just think it's a terrible way to think. And I love the fact that I've been with a man for a long time and now I'm with a woman, because I can tell you that there's things I didn't appreciate about my partner, my husband, because we don't look at the other side of things. We only look at what we do. We only look at things from our perspective. But if we change our perspective, that's one of the greatest gifts we can have. You can only see things from the direction you're looking. And if you want to see it differently, then change it. Change where you're standing. And
really quick, Kimberly, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I want to really hit on that sentiment of what you're expressing right now, because, and fortunately, and as many of the viewers and listeners may know already, the idea in certain conversations that I've had, with experts from around the world, the idea or the framing of this concept of perception comes up more often, than I would have imagined. And I think it really is absolutely the way of seeing life in a way. I don't know, maybe you can speak more to it, but what I mean is every experience is viewed one of two ways. It can be anything. If you eat a peanut butter sandwich, it can be, like, for me, the most delicious thing in the world, or It can be the most disgusting thing, right? The hottest day of the year can be, wow, I have heat and I have their sunlight, or it can be the most miserable. Like what you said about COVID, COVID can be blessing in disguise, because it helps reshape and reframe our way of doing things and what we would really want, versus something completely, there's a million other reasons to not like COVID, etc. So again, the idea, and let me just tell you, I think, like, for me personally, since last year and up until now, the idea of focusing and taking a lot more out of my life and having a more, like, agile focus on certain things that make me happy and understand more about myself has been the gift, right? It's like, okay, I don't need to be all over the place all the time and just filling my mind with things that make me numb, or just see things that make my mind clutter, whatever. It's about just a few things, giving more space for the empty space to grow with the positive energy, and letting that flourish, because we have so many limited hours each and every day to really have anything happen, right? So So I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think it's so important, this whole framing of perception, because again, going back to your story, it's like, okay, do I take this thing that really was dragging me down in a certain way that was negative in my life? How do I shift that into something that could be ultimately where you are now in this year of 2021, where you're giving something back to people and empowering them in a very beautiful way?
Yeah. Well, perspective is like, it's a great thing, right? But again, for me, I was, my perspective from that angle was that I was happy, and, I had 2 children and a marriage and all that. But when my perspective changed, meaning when I realized that I wasn't really being who I was meant to be, or maybe not as much of who I was meant to be, then I had to find a way to be completely grateful for that, but as well grateful for the chance to grow more. And I think that's really what it is for me, is that, I've had the chance to grow and to become more of who I am. And I think people get caught up in, so from their perspective, I always said to people, you might not be able to see the lighthouse from your perspective, but if you want to see it from a different perspective, walk around, right? And I think we stay where we're at because we're afraid. If I move to the other side and I see a different perspective, then what if I want that? And that changing means that I'm not going to be the same anymore. And who am I going to be if I change? Well, if you don't have the courage to move to that angle, you're not going to see it from a different perspective. It's the same way when we can't relate to somebody that's really lived a hard life or had a lot of hard things happen to them. Perspective is everything, because we have to be able to see from their point of view. And if we can't, then our perspective is very small, right?
And how much, and this might be a very simplistic question in a way, but I think it's an important one. How much do you think we really overcomplicate our life in general? I mean, what I mean by that is the following, is because I think perception, if discovered or if arrived at in the correct way, can bring something beautiful that I like to term as clarity. Clarity like in a personal way, clarity to me has meant that once I know what should be in and not be in my own personal experience of life, the feeling of clarity is like the feeling of relief and the weight off your shoulders and your chest. That's what clarity means to me. Is it's almost like a filtration phase, right?
Absolutely.
So when I say that, when I say, do we overcomplicate things? What I mean is like, what I mean in more practical ways, like, are we trying to take in too much all the time? Are we trying to, figure things or people out too much all the time and get confused? Are we really spreading our energy so thin with information, with news, with people, with circumstances, with gossip, with da-da-da, I could have a laundry list of these things, but are we spreading ourselves so thin that the clarity doesn't really attune to our true inner selves in a way that can give us just, a certain bliss that I think we all desire?
I would have to say yes, because one of my things is I always say contrast creates clarity. So sometimes we need the contrast, right? Like COVID.
Right.
And it's as simple as this. My youngest stepson is 10. And before COVID, he didn't really have the awareness that he had, because COVID slowed everything down, and they were out of school for 6 months. And the thing I love is that we were going to the beach more, we were hiking more, and we love it all the time. But I think that we as human beings are running 150 miles an hour with blindfolders on, and we're not paying attention to anything that's like important. We're missing all the big stuff, right? So with the contrast of COVID comes the clarity. What did we see last year? We seen it was a heavy energy, and it's heavier now because it's kind of shifted. But last year we seen more people out walking, more people enjoying the beach, more people gardening. And even when I went into the stores, because I bought a greenhouse myself, they said people are still spending just as much money, but they're spending it differently. So the contrast of never having the time, COVID gave people the time. So the clarity was, a lot of people figured out that they really wanted to appreciate life more. So they did get back to earth. They did do things like planting and stuff. So the clarity was, a lot of people realized that they weren't living life the way they wanted to, and they made the changes. But people are suffering because they didn't make that change. So their perspective didn't change, even though the universe has been giving people a massive clarity, right? We've been given this incredible gift of perspective, but you can't get people to pay attention to that if they don't have what it takes to pay attention to that. And not everybody has the gift of awareness, or even to have a space to talk. And to, even the way you and I are, we're just talking about stuff, and a lot of people are going to listen, and some people will love it, and some people won't like it at all. But that's the whole point of life, is that perspective is a gift. Perspective is something that if people can understand, if they could just take themselves out of where they are to the other person's life, right? So if we can have any kind of awareness to say, hey, I want you to understand from my perspective. But there's too much about power and control today. So everybody has to have things their way, or they can't even hear you. I mean, my clients come in and they'll talk to me, and it could be something simple, like they can't find enough time to enjoy each other at night. Well, from my perspective, I'll ask them a bunch of questions. So what's the issue? How come you can't find time? And they're like, well, by the time I work full time, come home, take care of the kids, blah, blah, blah. And I'll say, well, okay, but what if you said to your husband, I'm sure your husband would much sooner have a new perspective through your eyes, right? So that you could have the awareness to say, hey, I would love to spend time with you tonight. So how about you make supper, I'll get the kids' homework done, and then we'll both put the kids in the tub and put them to bed, and then we'll have time together. But people are afraid to ask the question, right? And they're afraid to have a different perspective because they're holding on to theirs for dear life for fear of what it means to have a different outlook on things.
And again, going back to this framing of perception, and if we complicate to what degree various aspects of our life, and maybe you can speak more to this because you work more with certain modalities of energy. There's two umbrellas that this seems to fall under: love or fear, right? Fear encompasses judgment, prejudice, discrimination, myriad of things. Love is really the force that attracts and propels us into really our true self, our true nature, and maybe even the soul's desire of the perception of the outcome of life that we really do want, right? Doesn't it seem like it just falls under those two main categories, and whether we get to a certain way we do or a certain way we don't, right? And also, I have a question, Kimberly. Do you think based on the work you do and your practice, do you think in this life, if we don't essentially carry out our, let's say, sometimes I don't like to use the word mission because it's like, sounds like you had a contract written and signed, maybe you did, I don't know. But if I think of it more in an energetic sense, do you think if we're not energetically getting to where we're supposed to go with our, these bodies, that we have to relearn that somehow in a different life or in a different circumstance?
I absolutely do. And I think that's where love and fear kind of takes a different look altogether. Is I probably should have had a little more fear in my life, but I didn't, because I've always kind of known who I was, and I've always had a love for myself. And I think that where people struggle is they are so fearful, and there's so much insecurity today, and it really is being bred from generation to generation. And I think that how can we not have faith in what we chose, right? And even on another, why would we think, I guess even as a young child, no matter what happened to me, I always knew somebody was worse off than me. And I was always grateful for where I was, and I was grateful to have the awareness I had. So I think today there's a lot missing, and we're breeding entitlement as well. So not only do we have fear, but we have this entitlement. So how do we teach our kids if we don't give them enough to be, it's one of these dying breeds. You can't find anybody to mow a lawn or even shovel a driveway today, right? We wanted to make things easier for our children, but we've taken their power from them and we've crippled them, right? So if they don't have things to do to feel good about themselves, then they're lost, right? So more fear is being bred because they don't have anything to feel good about, right?
Hey, let me tell you something really briefly along that thread, because when I grew up, well, I'm still growing up, but when I was younger, okay, I mean, I grew up in, divorced household. Well, okay, my parents divorced, right? I grew up in a situation with my brothers that was challenging, that just because, it was the age and everything else. So I started actually working at a very young age. Like I had my first job at 9 years old, but it was a paper route, right? I mean, yep. But it was available, and yep. In those days, during in the 90s in particular, early 90s, when I had started that job, it was just, at 9 years old, when you kind of, I had to get the job because I wanted something, and my father said, well, if you want that, go earn it, go get it, And yeah. At the beginning, it was kind of hard to hear that, but once I started to do it, and like got up very early for years, like years and years doing that, and was earning my own money and buying my own things. It taught me so much, you know. I think there's two different types of like I always think of this analogy like going to the gym, right? There's always resistance, let's say with a negative kind of, I don't want to say just purely negative, I would say almost evil energy, where it's like put upon you to and really put you in a place that you can almost decide not to be in, versus a resistance like what I'm trying to speak with this analogous way of the paper out, like, okay, you want to earn your way in life and have your own things and go work for it and go, you know, because that teaches you a lot. So I think there's like a healthy resistance versus like a nefarious resistance, if that makes sense. So I think resistance builds a lot of our character. It builds a lot of, it kind of steers us and knocks us in the direction of where we really need to be going in life, as you know, through your story. And it really maybe puts us in front of the right people, right? At the same time, it gets us away from certain people. Like, and if the more we don't see these things as just pure good or pure bad, etc., but just as lessons and just as is, we're gonna have a lot. I don't know, I'm just talking about from experience. We're gonna have a lot more peace of mind. So, like, when people come to you and really, really, truly want to change their life around because they just feel like in such a rut, do you show them those doors of opportunity when they come to you?
Well, for me, I do work on a lot of different things. So I have a lot of clients that are women that are overworked and trying to find enough time to be a good, you know, to have a full-time job, to be a parent, and to be a good partner. And I think that they lose themselves in trying to be everything for everybody else. And what they don't realize is the number one thing is to have self-love, because it's like that old saying, when you're good, everybody else around you can be good. And if you're not good, then nobody else is good. It's kind of like that, because the more we love ourselves, the more you emanate love outwards. But if you don't know what love is for self, how can you know how to give that love back, you know? And it's the same thing with working. From my perspective, the world's full of money, right? I've been working since I was 10 years old, and I shoveled driveways, mowed lawns, sold Christmas trees, and I loved being able to buy milk and bread and bring it home. Nobody asked me to, but I felt good that I could. So a lot of my clients come in for a lot of different reasons, and I deal with intimacy issues. I deal with loads and loads of things, but probably the thing I get the most is people trying to figure out who they really are and how can they own more of who they are, right? And how can they find happiness inside of, you know, living without knowing who they are. So for me, it's step one, step two, step three sometimes, but it's like, so what is it you're looking for? And what are you willing to do to get that? Right? So that's kind of one of my things. And it's the same with, I think so many people are lost. They don't know how to connect with their partner at night, because they're so in, you know, they're the hamster on the wheel, right? They're running. They're doing all this stuff, but really they're not fulfilled because they're doing all the stuff that's mundane, and they're not doing enough of the soul filling stuff, right? And I think that's where we fall. Like, I always swim in the ocean because it invigorates me, and I feel like I'm in the universe's womb all year long. Pacific Ocean, Atlantic Ocean, doesn't matter how cold it is. I've been from one end of the country to the other in the cold water. But it's because I never stop pushing myself to feel life on different levels, right? And the only limits are the limits we put in front of ourselves. So if we think that we can only be a mom and, you know, and a wife and that, and some people only come here for that. You know, I think my mother solely came here to be a mother of 4 children and a husband to a a bigger kid than we were, you know?
Yeah.
So I think that's what she came here for, and God love her. I don't know how she does it because I couldn't do that. I know I came here to be more than a mother and more than a daughter and sister. And I came here to be somebody that shared my story with other people who needed to hear it so that they could decide on their own what they wanted to do with their life, right? So I think that a lot of what's going wrong in the world is we have to change our perspective. We have to open up our minds. We have to see things from others. You know, for me, I've always been that kid that no matter what was happening in the world, I could feel it, and it broke my heart. It didn't matter who it was. I would think, how can we treat somebody different? Because, you know, when I was a little kid, I can remember thinking, how can we treat people different just because their skin's darker than ours? Or like, what would it matter if a man loved a man or a woman loved a woman? Like, what's that? What would it matter? You know? So for me, I've always felt this, I guess, a heaviness to do more. And since I decided that I was going to do more through how I lived my life and how I wanted to open that up to show people that there's more than one way to live, you know?
That is so powerful, and that's so important. And, you know, I think, again, just everyone, especially if they go to someone like you, Kimberly, if they can be at least, because, you know, we need guides in this life. We need leaders. We need kind of someone just to help us steer the ship in a certain way where, you know, we get out of the storm, you know, we're not anchored down, and that we really go towards the horizon that is unique and beautiful to each of us, you know, to each and every one of us, because we're all very unique in our own way in that way. And just to conclude this conversation, Kimberly, these times goes way too quick, but we're under a certain, you know, limit with our episodes, but, you know, I wish we had a lot more time, and hopefully we can do a continuation at this some point. But before we finish, for our viewers and the listeners, would just be a very nice, simple exercise people could wake up with, just starting tomorrow. Like, just wake up in the morning and just start off their day with something beautiful and positive. What would be just a small little nugget of insight, of inspiration that you could tell them to do, because I think starting off the day right really sets the tone for everything. So what would be just kind of your little insight into that?
Well, for me, I actually do this probably 100 times a day. But when I wake up in the morning, I'm, number one, grateful to be here. I'm grateful. I kind of think of the sun, right? Because the sun is something that's warm, and people really connect with the sun in a powerful way. So it's like it brings light, it brings like this warmth. And for me, I always fill myself with that kind of light. I always imagine myself sitting on the beach, you know, sun barreling down at me, and I just let it fill me with love. And I emanate that love outward. So I would get right into it like a meditation, and I would fill myself up. And once I'm full, then I'm allowing myself for it to almost be spilling out over everybody else, right? And sometimes people have a hard time visualizing. And I say to people, if you have a hard time visualizing anything, then it's all about, meditation is all about allowing yourself to get into that space of feeling. So for anyone who's had a child, knows what that unconditional love feels like the minute that child is born into this life. And that feeling of, oh my gosh, we were a part of this, you know, that love creates this. I feel like that's kind of my go-to for people. I say, if you can't visualize or you don't know how to meditate, then just imagine that first breath that your child took, or the first time you held them, and how amazing that felt. I know both of my kids slept in my arm for 6 months because I didn't want to let them go.
Did they still do that?
No, but my son's 31 years old, and he'll still kiss me right in the lips, and my daughter's the same way, right? Yeah. So my kids and I are very close, and it's it's a true testament to who you are when you leave a 32-year relationship and you throw your kids' world upside down, and they love you unconditionally because they know that you would never chose it if it wasn't what was best for you. So I think that's probably a big aha, proud moment for me as a mom, is that no matter what I've done in my life, my kids totally love and adore me, and I love and adore them. And I expect them to be who they are more than I expect them to be who I want them to be.
I think part of the power of what you have as a person that I see as well is just purely authentic. I think I get that energetic feeling from you, Kimberly, and I think that's really a very what you just described for people to do in the morning. I encourage all of the viewers and listeners to engage in something like that, at least that is comfortable for you. But for sure, just start off your day right. But also, I think the more and more you do things like that, those kind of practices, and just things that really resonate well with you, your true, authentic, and real self really emanates, to a very amazing degree. And I feel that from you. I think anyone who watches this episode definitely will feel that as well. And I think that's a really beautiful place to get at in life. So, Kimberly, I thank you so much for this amazing episode and discussion with you. And I imagine that there is ways people can connect and work with you from anywhere in the world. So could you please let our viewers and listeners know where they can, seek you out and contact you?
Sure. So I have two businesses that I work in, of course. So chrysaliswellnesscenter.ca or soulsdesirecoaching.com.
Okay, perfect. So we're going to include all of your information in the description for the video and the podcast, and all the pinned comments and all of our platforms. So please, all spear lifters out there, check her out. Kimberly will really, really be a positive force in your life and just help you get on, the track that you may really be desiring if you feel stuck in a certain aspect of your life. So I encourage everyone to please seek out Kimberly. Kimberly, thank you so much again, and we will see everyone on the next episode.
Thank you too. Have a great night.